This is the Rent Supply Roaming Podcast. This is Paul. Good morning. Thanks for listening. I don't know. There's so much going on in the news. I don't really... I think just in everything that's happening in the world, I think that the more people that get involved and voice an opinion or just... at least form an opinion of their own and not blindly follow some dogma, some rhetoric, which is why I have a problem with political parties, primarily the main two political parties. At any given moment, either one of them can potentially be worse than the other. They've gone back and forth in acts of horror and, more important, I guess, and more frequently were acts of incompetence. But anyway, there's the hyper-liberalism shit just has to stop. It's become so stupid. I mean... the blocking the First Amendment type stuff is just, oh my goodness. If you don't like the First Amendment, don't use it to make a statement against it. I mean, it is the pinnacle of hypocrisy when someone has the balls to say that someone else should not be able to speak their mind in a non-threatening way. And if it's even questionable whether or not it's threatening, then it's not threatening. I mean, there are clear boundaries to the limitations of the First Amendment. I mean, you have to overtly be threatening pretty much imminent danger to someone for it to be considered an unconstitutional use of freedom of speech. I mean, we've allowed shit to go too far as it is. Replacing mankind with humankind. You know what? Hey, that's perfectly cool. I get that. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you get down to let's replace the name of a manhole cover, it's like, I'm sorry. There is a legitimacy to wanting to refer to people kind in a non-sexist or sexual way in general. I mean, I get that makes sense. It's reasonable. If I was a woman, I would probably be not offended, but a little bit like, what's this shit with mankind? So I get that one, and I get a bunch of them. But I mean, I firmly believe that most people are capable of, and somewhere inside understand the importance of meeting somewhere in the middle, of negotiating, of compromising, because that's what things should take. But when you get crazy fucking people that, you know, I'm sorry, if I firmly support the right to bear arms, but if you have grenades and shit, you may be stretching it. And for anybody who feels that the right to bear arms is up for debate, it's not. And I'm just saying that because look into what legally it requires to change a constitutional amendment. it will never happen. The reason it will never happen is because whether anyone wants to, regardless of what people say, everyone cares about gun violence. Everyone cares about reducing gun violence. Everyone cares about the people who are needlessly killed by firearms. But there's a drastic and very visible difference in what the beliefs on how you remedy that are. I believe in gun rights. I believe in gun rights because, above all, the right to bear arms was not for hunting. It wasn't even for self-defense in everyday life, necessarily. It was in place to allow the citizens to defend their country against what would someday likely be a very oppressive regime that the United States would morph into. And I only say that because every dynasty has pretty similar arc as far as the stages in which that dynasty goes. And by the way, the more liberal a society becomes, and when I say liberal, I'm not talking about race or about sex or anything like that, because here's a plain and simple fact. Everyone should be treated equal based upon just humanity. I mean, I really could give a shit less what color you are, what sex you are. However, you're not going to convince me that there are 70-some fucking genders. There's 2. That's a biological fact. Now, I'm not insulting anyone, but biologically, if you're male, you're fucking male. If you're female, you're female. I mean, that's just how it is. If someone wants to be a transgender or whatever, it doesn't matter. I have no interest in that. I think most people have no interest in that until the shit comes up. Now, I get it that people of alternate lifestyles sometimes have, they're bullied, they have a hard time. And this goes back, many generations over different things that make one part of an alternate, like a counterculture. And that's, for that, I'm sorry. I mean, I don't believe that, that should happen. And I believe that there should be some recourse for that. But you don't get to choose what your pronoun is going to be. I'm very much in the habit of addressing men as sir and women as ma'am or miss. And I do that because I believe people should be treated with respect. And there are people who do not find that a sign of respect. Men who, you call someone sir, and, there's a phrase I've heard many times, which is, don't call me sir, I work for a living. No, I've heard it. It's humorous, and I think that some guys actually mean it, and they find it somehow offensive being called sir. I think for the most part, people just use the phrase. But that's the same situation of a misunderstanding that I think occurs all too often with people. I am addressing a man as sir because my belief is that is a respectful thing to do. And so that's why I do it. Is someone getting offended by me doing so, I'll try to remember to not call them that in the future, because I don't want to upset anybody. I mean, especially over something that I consider silly. But I'm not going to feel bad about it for a fucking second. I don't care what it made you feel, because that wasn't the intent. And I'm not going to... I think it's unreasonable to ask people to apologize for unexpected outcomes. That's... I guess there are definitely lines. I mean, a drunk driver kills somebody. Yeah, it's an unexpected outcome, but I mean, he didn't, or she, or whatever, I don't think had any intent to do so, but they didn't have the intent to be, to take the proper steps necessary to not do so. I think that if someone's intent is... I'll say decent, it's not meant to be hurtful, it's, then trying to command that person refer to you in some, in some term that has been made up, whether you support that term or not, that's not the point. The point is, you do not get to dictate what people refer to you as. I mean, it's the evolution of colored people to black people to minorities to African Americans to black Americans, and however that is, that came about as society became more enlightened to the very simple fact that your skin color in no way makes you a better or a worse person than someone of an opposite skin color. So, I mean, that was an evolution, I think, that came out of... there was some political correctness involved, but I think that most people just, okay, well, if... Yeah, I don't want to offend anybody, so if I'm talking about... I say black people because that's the black people I know, prefer to be called black people. We've had the conversations, whatever, but it's, to me, it's whatever, if I know what you prefer to be called, and it's a fucking word that I have heard that you didn't just make up out of the blue. I mean, if you're gonna identify as Aquaman, well, you fucking do that. I don't really care how well you play the part, how toned you get. I don't care if you can hold your breath underwater for an hour. I'm not fucking calling you Aquaman. It's, if your name's Doug, man, I'll call you Dougie the Aquaman or something. I don't know. I mean, we'll work something out, but there's just, you don't get to dictate how the remainder of society behaves and demand that their behavior change to make you comfortable. No one owes you comfort. It's a basic principle that socialism is wrong, is the idea of you're robbing the efforts of one to pay for another. Now, granted, I will make and defend the argument that in the current, in the society we live in now, with the insane fortunes, the insane wealth that belong to certain families of the world through banking empires and things like that dwarf